Hello, girls. Welcome to our part two, Choosing to Be Your Own Boss with Ingrid Martin and Susan Eldridge. Hello, ladies. Welcome.
Hi,
Hello.
Sarah.
So we have discussed since our part one. Now, our part one was where are all the girls? And we discussed, is there inequality? Why aren't the girls conducting? Why aren't they being bosses? Whatever. And we basically discussed all that in part one. So go and give that a look, people, because that was really nuanced and complex and not as simple as we all think, thanks to these girls, Ingrid and Susan. So thanks for helping me work that little problem out in my head. Now, our second problem is, well, if there's not too much discrimination, if it's just up to us to stand up and do our own thing, and how do we do that? So today's topic, how choosing to be your own boss and how we're going to do it. What are the magical ingredients for that? So I know you girls have those ideas already because you are your own boss. So let's get going. What's the first thing that comes to mind?
You go. Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is actually the question of why do you need to be your own boss? And for me as a conductor, that is, although I've been conducting for a long time, I'm early in my journey in terms of working with professional ensembles, and that basically the system is set up in a way that is extremely unclear, not transparent. There's no consistency in terms of processes. It's absolutely the opposite of if you're an instrumentalist. You put on a job search alert for auditions, and when the audition gets advertised, you learn your excerpts, you turn up to the audition, and you're either in or you're out for each of the rounds. And it's a very clear, obvious process, and none of that exists for conductors or composers, I might add. And so for me, being your own boss is really about, actually, I have no control over the system. In fact, despite significant research, I still have no idea about how the system works. So the only way that I can get an opportunity to work with really awesome players is to make it happen for myself.
Step
That's my
one.
first thought.
Step one, if you want to be a part of something and it doesn't exist, make it yourself. We covered that in part one too. There's no use waiting by the phone. You have to get up and go, I can do this, but it takes money. Susan, what have you got to add to that?
Uh, the it takes money is a very interesting question, and I'm sure we're going to get onto that. But I think for me, the choosing to be your own boss is there's not a structure that I want to work in, and yet that I found, and there's not a cluster of people doing the work in this country that I can be part of yet. So instead of being choosing to be in a system where I'm constantly pushing the boundaries and trying to, like, it's like trying to drag an anchor basically, and that was making me unwell, is I just decided, well, what if I got out of being in somebody else's tent, and was just able to work with organisations where there might be random people spread around. So it was choosing to get out of working in a way that was making me unwell because my values were different to the values of the people that I was surrounded with. So it's also about making the choice and taking responsibility for doing that, and what that means when you've got, like we have, a mortgage and two children, being two freelancers is, we made the choice to work in this way, and we could also make a choice to not work in this way if it continues not to serve us very well.
Yes, and the balance of how much can I earn money from something that, as you say, makes me unwell psychologically. How much of that can I do to support the other projects that I truly
Yep.
believe in? I'll just take my own situation for a second. The mental acrobatics one needs to work for a big organization with many, many, many hierarchies within it, not only in the administration, but in the performing side of it too. It's all hierarchy. It's like the military.
Mm-hmm.
The mental acrobatics you need to convince yourself that this is for you and it's secure. You use a lot of words of safety to justify remaining in it. And oftentimes it takes a very specific kind of person who can remain in that situation for life. Now, I am one of those people, but I don't have a mortgage because I use all of my money to create environments that don't exist. So I absolutely understand what you girls are talking about when you talk about creating a world that doesn't exist yet. Now, I know you're not bringing down the establishment. You're not actually doing that. But it is really difficult to change a big old ship, like you talked about the dragging anchor before. It's a really great analogy, because it's not that the organization itself can't change or won't change or doesn't want to change. It's just there's so many components to it that it is so hard to turn the whole thing at the same time in the same direction. So if you're an impatient person, if you're a doer, if you're a thinker, if you're fast on your feet, you can't stay in an institutionalized situation like that. So risk everything, get out of it, but there must be some practical advice that you girls can give, really detailed practical advice you can give for people who are willing to risk it all and get out of the grind.
So I think the first thing to say is it's not necessarily risk it all and get out of the grind. And I think you kind of spoke to this idea of being within an organization, and that, you know, there is a lot of mental acrobatics that go on, and there's politics, and that's really exhausting. And lots of people might say, I just can't be bothered with that. So that's a good thing to know, is can you be bothered with the politics, right? But the other thing that you mentioned about that institutional job is that it does give you financial security and stability. And that's what a lot of people decide that they want and need. And that is not what going out and risking it all is. So if you know that you want to have that financial security and stability, but for example, you don't want the politics, well, then maybe even if you've got some kind of musical or artistic dream and pursuit that you're going to go after in projects, that you decide, well, I'm just going to work at Myers. And I'm very happy working at Myers, which is stable and secure, that has no stress, no politics, no hierarchy. And I just do my job. And then I've got that blanket that then enables me to do the other thing. So it's not necessarily a black and white, like be in the institution and be unhappy and then go and do your projects on the side. That, you know, you can find a balance of things that kind of meet your particular kind of fingerprint of your needs, of what you know is right for you, which is all stuff I've learned from Susan and completely stolen. So I'll let her keep talking about it.
I think Ingrid's absolutely nailed that. The starting point is know what you need. So, and the three starting points for that when I'm working with people are always, do you know what your financial needs are? And everybody's financial needs are different depending on the quality of life you want to lead. So do you know roughly how much annual income you need to pull in to live the quality of life that you want? Do you know how you want to structure your time? So are you someone who needs a lot of routine and predictability? Or like for us, we get up every day and who knows, is that okay with you? And some people can't cope with that. So do you know what you need to bring in? Do you know how you want to structure your time and how much fixed and how much flexible you can cope? And the third thing is, who are the kind of people that you want to be surrounded with? So if you can ask yourself those questions around money, time and tribe, then you can start to look at, well, what's going to meet all those needs? What is something that looks like it's going to tick those boxes? So always starts from turning within. Otherwise, we're making decisions that don't have any strategy behind them and that aren't driven by values and needs. They're driven by reflex and grabbing at the first thing that comes our way. Because that's like Sarah, where I was at the back of 2020. We're both freelancers. Ingrid's a conductor, so no, it doesn't take much to do the very rough back of a beer coaster maths about what last year looked like for us. And it got to sort of September, October, and I was panicking and just started blindly applying for jobs, and that was really driven by panic. And instead of being able to say, actually, and really get fine-grained detail, like on our numbers, and say, actually, we're okay. It's like it's really tight, but we're okay. And what would be worse is to panic and take a full-time job that was making me unhappy again. So I went through that for about 2 months last year, just applying for things to try and ease the discomfort of the responsibility that we had made to live a freelance life, because it was really freaking uncomfortable. It's still not very easy, but I couldn't sit in that discomfort. I was having trouble coming back to, oh, this is a choice we've made. And I was, like panicking basically and grabbing at things out of feeling fearful and uncomfortable.
Yeah, so not from a frame of mind of positive energy and living in the moment as such, but that fantasizing in the negative about what could happen, all the worst case
and
scenarios.
Also that what I found really hard was a sense of belief that the work I do is valuable and necessary, and it's my responsibility to find the fit for that. So that was a big part of it as well, was the confidence in my competence, that the work I do is valuable and there's a place for it, and that's not going to be a 6-week turnaround. That might be 6 years. And so I might be in this very uncomfortable place, because that's how that's how you get to the good places, getting through this discomfort. I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
No, just this discomfort is a good segue. That coming back to that idea of money, time, and tribe, that I think when you're asking yourself those questions about like, what do I want from those 3 things, that it's really easy to be blindsided or kind of pushed in one particular direction by what you've experienced. And what you've experienced is probably going to feel comfortable, because that's what you're habited into, and we feel comfortable with our habits. So you might think, oh yeah, I really like working in a very haphazard kind of unstructured way, and that's just who I am. I'm a creative person, and no one can control my time. But if you haven't tried doing something structured, like maybe that is the thing for you. So the other part of that is, if you're not sure about any of those 3 things, or you want to get a bit more clarity, is to kind of experiment, and whether that's actually going and doing it for real, or doing some real sort of imagination work and like writing stuff down on paper and imagining what those different scenarios would be, so that you're not just making decisions based on your past experience and what feels comfortable, because comfort often just comes from what is familiar, not necessarily what is right.
That's a fantastic point. Yeah. All those creative people that it's a mentality from the 19th century, actually, where all the creatives we've ever heard of were destitute, drunk, useless artists. They can do a beautiful painting, but they have no food to eat and they can't earn any money. That doesn't have to be the way we are now. You can be a disciplined, creative person. Richard Mills is
also, Sarah, I think that's it's a load of garbage, because how can you do your best work if you're suffering?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
absolute
a myth. Garbage. That whole starving artist mentality, or I deserve, I deserve not to have the things I want because I like the work I do, is absolutely rubbish. And that's part of the problem of the way we train people, is we're not focused on helping them articulate the value that they give to others. And if they can do that, then you can figure out, well, who that's going to be and how do we transact. But that whole, I'm a starving artist is a choice.
Yeah, I have students. I have students who believe that they're not working hard enough unless it's some suffering is involved as well, and some elongated practice session that nearly kills them physically and psychologically.
There's a really awesome thing I was listening to Sarah talking about the flat earth. They were using the flat earthers as an analogy, right? And they were talking about tribe and tribe thinking, which is exactly what happens. And I'm going to use the music school analogy of, we want to belong to the tribe, but we also want to stand out. And the way you stand out at something like music school is by being the most extreme version. So if you were the one, my fingers are bleeding because I practiced for 8 hours, or I've got no money because I can't work because I'm practicing all day, you're fitting in and standing out, but it's standing out for completely it's damaging reasons. And that's how you get to exactly what you're talking about. I didn't eat yesterday because I did 19 hours practice instead.
And I think this is a responsibility of obviously it's a self-responsibility, but it's also a responsibility, I think, of every teacher, like both in a school and in the tertiary setting and in those sort of settings around tertiary, like pre-professional programs, fellowships, to be really, first of all, the teachers to be honest with themselves and to do a bit of self-analysis and say, oh, have I actually bought into this? And am I perpetuating this mentality of, work hard until you bleed? You'll only get by if you do 8 hours of practice, because actually, and this is the great irony about higher education, is that, higher education claims to be this like bastion of like academic integrity, but like very little of what they're doing is evidence-based. And it's like, if you're in the School of Music, the School of Education is just that way. It's like, here in Melbourne, it's a half an hour tram ride away, but it's not that far away. And they're doing all this research about what good teaching and learning is and about good like mental health practices. And none of that is like translating 30 minutes down the road to say, actually, you should be practicing smarter, not harder. That practice involves being off your instrument. That practice involves so many things that isn't just like woodshedding some technical passage that you're going to play once in a recital for 2 people that, newsflash, nobody cares about.
You're sounding like me now, Ingrid. You're sounding like me. Hey,
we are the same people.
I've got an explanation for all of that. The problem with our industry, the classical music industry, is that it's like an apprentice system. You devote yourself like an apostle to your teacher, and you do exactly what your teacher says, hopefully. But that teacher is simply passing on what their teacher said and their teacher said and their teacher said. But unfortunately, there have been so many changes to the very nature of what we do in the last 100 years that this doesn't apply anymore. You can no longer look to your teacher for advice about the kind of professional musician you're going to be. Your teacher probably didn't work with click tracks. Your teacher probably didn't commission new music. Your teacher probably didn't plug in an electric violin. Your teacher probably didn't do all of the things that now you're required to do. Your teacher most definitely was not part of the early music revolution, but probably opposed it when it came out. So you are up against now, as a student now, you're up against this horrible dichotomy where you have to follow what your teacher says, but underneath it all, that maybe they're not as relevant as they were a couple of generations ago. So what does that mean for becoming your own boss? It means you have such a conflict inside yourself already at the student level, because you have this feeling that maybe your teacher doesn't get what's going on, but you have to follow what they say. So that causes, like we said in part 1, the most extraordinary self-esteem problems, which is the key to doing anything, forging ahead on your own, right? So what have you got to say about that?
Well, I think 2 quick things about the teacher thing, and then I'll jump into the how do you be your own boss in that weird scenario which you described. So yes, there's definitely a responsibility on the student to become aware of that context, that the people that are teaching me have not experienced what is going on in the world right now. That's a really big one. Like if people can realize that, they're really on their way already. But as you said, that creates a bit of conflict of, well, what do I do? Do I do what I think is going to prepare me for moving ahead, or do I do what my teacher says? So we'll get to that in a second. But I think there's also a responsibility on the teacher, who is kind of shaping the experience of so many students, these teachers, to realize that as well, to realize that my experience is not necessarily relevant to the world that my students are about to go into, or that they're going to go into in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. Is going to be even different. We can't imagine that right now. That, okay, well, how could I change my teaching in order to be able to minimize this conflict? And that's about changing your teaching from I teach the way I was taught to how do I best serve the student in front of me. So instead of it being this industrial one-size-fits-all model, that I'm looking at the student in front of me as an individual and saying, okay, what does that person want? Do they want to go off and all I want to do is be a Hollywood studio musician and play click tracks? In which case, wow, okay, I better give them some experience in doing that. Let's find some pieces that they can do in their recital that have an electronic backing track that they can practice doing it with a click track. Or, you know, do they want to do whatever they want to do? How can I help support and propel that person along on their individual journey? So it's this move from industrial, everyone does the same thing, to individualized learning, which PS has been happening in like schools for a really long time, but ironically higher education is the anchor that takes a long time to catch on to these things, even though it's where the research is coming from in the first place. So the teacher has so much responsibility of breaking down that conflict between what the student wants and what they say. And if they're equipping people with skills rather than content, and skills of how to think, how to solve musical problems, how to practice, how to be independent in your own musical problem solving, how to think and how to listen, then that student can apply that to anything. Even if the teacher says, I'm going to teach you this Mozart concerto because that's what I know, but I'm going to teach you through the lens of these extremely general concepts that are not only going to set you up to play your instrument or sing or whatever it is really well or compose. But PS, all those things could get you a job in anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything, not just music.
Yeah.
So I think there's like a lot of responsibility on the teachers to change practice. And it's funny because particularly in classical music, and I'm not saying that everyone should go and get an education qualification by any means, but it is ironic that in music, so many people are teaching that have no training in how to teach.
I know.
And day one of learning how to teach, day one of you doing a dip ed or a Master of Education is, hey folks, don't teach how you were taught.
Right.
That's like day one.
Yeah, wow. See,
I
I
mean,
don't know that.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm lucky that I'm naturally what you're describing, because I had an incredible combination in my own education of the strictest, most old-fashioned way of learning, which is copying but being told. But it was very deep education, whereas now it's like, oh, how do we get the attention of kids back now? Oh, maybe we should play everything with Star Wars theme. You know, maybe we can't expect them to be bored. If they're bored, what's going to happen, right? So I had just the standard education, which was one-way transfer of information, which they're saying that's not great now, but I have a situation where my son would have really benefited from that really old-fashioned education, because it was one way, it was black and white, there was no discussion, there was no creative exchange of ideas, no one cared what kids thought when we were kids. We were kids. Here's the information. There, learn it, memorize it, regurgitate it. And I actually feel happy that I'd had this old-fashioned education, but we're so off track now, it's not even funny. And I knew this would happen, and it happens to us, and I absolutely love it. So let's just get back on track. More advice. What are the main points that have been your focus and your success? I mean, you've talked a little bit about the hardships today, but you must have had some successes here. Let's not make out like you're in your mum's basement. You know, you're in your own basement. You're in your own basement. This is a step up from your parents' basement. So, success stories, please. What has worked for you?
Well, I will absolutely get to that, because it feeds on to just going back a little bit about, particularly for classical music, and particularly is this choosing to be your own boss, is looking at the values and the way that the organizations that you want to work for. So don't look at what they're doing or what they say they're doing, but look at how they're spending their money. And are they invested in dragging the chain in the way we've done in the Western European colonial canon of play music at people for $90 a ticket? Or are they invested in changing what they do to be necessary in the lives of their community? And that doesn't mean That doesn't necessarily mean dumbing down. It doesn't mean we're going to purely put our focus on serving social housing areas. Like their community means lots of different people, right? And there's segmentation of audiences that won't meet.
That's right. And that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Like, Harry Potter people might not go to Stravinsky. Like, that's okay. So it doesn't have to mean all things to all people. But if they're service oriented, so if you're looking at where you're going to put if you're looking at trying to build a map and have a compass for that, is knowing for you, are you someone who's invested in tradition and the way we used to do things? And that's fine. Or are you someone who's invested in the future of setting us up for what the next 50 years is going to look like? Because I don't believe we're going back, right? So if you can actually have a look, and this, for particularly like for any students, is get on the website of these organisations that you aspire to work for. Read what they're saying about the work they're doing. Even pull down their annual reports and have a look and see how are they. And it's all of this information about what they value is really easy to find. And then you can say, like for me, there are some organizations, I work with a lot of training organizations, and there are some, particularly in opera, that are very invested in doing things a certain way. In a very traditional model. I'm not interested in doing that. So I'm not, and we are not going to have a happy marriage, those people and me. And that's fine. So I choose not to seek to work with them because we don't care about the same thing, and that's okay, right? So I think that's part of it, is choosing to be your own boss, is knowing who values what and knowing what you value and trying to find a good alignment. So really, in terms of where you can get started, is there's the way to start really with anything, if you're looking at working for yourself and creating value and exchanging that value for dollars, is to have a thing called a problem statement. And problem statement has 3 parts. It has a who, that's very specific. I'll give you 3. It has what it is. So who is it for? What do they need? And what is the win? How is their life better because they've got this thing in their life, right? And the more specific you can be about this, the better you're going to be. So like something that's kind of on the right track but not going to give you enough information is young people need classical music concerts because they need classical music concerts. Okay, because I see a lot of string quartets doing this, right? Ingrid, can you, from the presentation you did on Sunday, give us what this might look like that's more detailed?
Yeah, okay. So instead of just young people, you could say, okay, what about young people who are aged 18 to 25 who played an instrument at school or sang? It's like did music at school, but they're not doing music anymore. Okay, that's a much more specific group of people. It doesn't necessarily tell you how to get to them, but it's a much more specific group than, I don't know what I put on my Facebook ad. And then what? Okay, so they need classical music concerts. Well, yeah, okay, like maybe they did music at school, but like why would they need the concert? Like why did they do music at school? So if I think about this group of people, they probably did music at school because they loved being with other people who enjoyed doing the same thing as them. And highly likely, in a way, it wasn't really about the music. It could have been a sport team. It could have been the art club or the chess club. So young people aged 18 to 25 who played an instrument or sang at school who are no longer doing it need a place to connect with other like-minded people, and how is that going to make their life better? It's going to allow them to make new friends at university in an unfamiliar environment. Okay, so there's a win. You could really create a series of concerts that were not just about the string, let's use the string quartet as an example, not just about the string quartet playing the Beethoven that their teacher told them to play, but instead it's, maybe the music is only half an hour of this 1 hour event, and the other half an hour is drinks and get to know you and musical speed dating of what instrument did you play or what did you sing at school, and there you get to meet people. And then there's like the string quartet just plays these interludes between the speed dating sessions, and and they're playing some Harry Potter and some like whatever it is that the people, and some video game music in between, so that those people are getting to make new friends at university. Like that's, you can see that in real life. Like that's something that you could imagine all the different parts of that event and go, okay, well, I need to book, like, I want this kind of venue because it needs to be a venue that has enough space for people to sit down and do their speed dating. And, oh, hey, maybe it doesn't actually need a stage because maybe all the speed dating people are in a circle and the string quartet's in the middle. And I'm going to need to organise drinks, and I'm going to need to organise a liquor licence, and
how much should the tickets cost?
Because they're uni students, so probably they're like not going to be any more than $20. So that's going to change my budget of other things. I mean, now you can easily go from what was this idea of young people need classical concerts, which is really PS because I want to play at them, to now I'm actually meeting a need of real human beings, and I can see a concrete way to do this.
What I get from this, and you both, is a more American approach to things. It's a less diffused, vague, oh, the poor young people or the poor normal people, they don't have classical music in their lives, so we're just going to put a Beethoven string quartet in a pub on Sunday afternoon, disturbing everybody who just wants to have a chat and a drink, because they're so deprived of this beautiful classical music. And what you do instead is you distill the idea right down to its essence, and then you have to ask yourself some hard questions. Well, do people need classical music? Do they actually? Well,
and also, and it forces you to say, well, how would I test this also? Because you have to, we're not a multi-million-dollar corporation. So this is what we do when we're out for a walk in our 1 hour of outside time in lockdown, is throw these ideas around and see how detailed we could get, like this kind of idea. And then we say, well, how would we test this? Is anybody else doing anything similar? Is anybody else doing, like, who's like, Uber didn't invent taking people from one place to another in a vehicle, right? They just modified someone else's idea. So is somebody else doing this with another art form, or is someone else doing this in another city? So then it allows you to do a bit of research and testing and see the assumptions that I've made. Are they, is there anything that's going to back those up? Or, because that's the next step, is we've made a lot of assumptions in this problem statement, is how do we test them, and then how do we try that out in a really low stakes way, and then how do we assess if that worked, and then off we go. And that's how you build a business of things.
Yeah. And would you say that the biggest problem is getting the idea out there? So the marketing of any idea. You girls are not short of ideas and not short of the detail and the workability of it. You're not short of the volunteer aspect, which means that you will find people to help you realize this dream. But getting it out there is, for me, the hardest thing. You can have as many ideas as you want, and if no one knows about it, what do you do? So thoughts on that, please.
I think that the three of us in this conversation are ideas people. I would say that what I see in the broader kind of area is that actually the biggest problem is, number one, not having ideas or not practicing having ideas from most people. So we kind of do that ourselves, and we have habited ourselves into being able to come up with all these crazy ideas, like
brainstorming for the sake of it.
Brainstorming, exactly.
Yep.
And that the brainstorming in a completely non-judgmental way. There's a really fantastic book called Choose Yourself, which is very much along the lines of this conversation, by a guy called James Altucher.
We'll link that.
One of the exercises that he talks about is just having a little book, and every day you write 10 ideas for something. It could be anything. Could be like a book title, or like 10
milkshake
flavors, or different varieties of Coca-Cola that you could make, like anything. but just 10 ideas. And it could be something related to you or something completely random, to just practice the muscle of having ideas space, and not filtering them.
Yeah.
Because I think what happens for so many people is they have an idea, and usually our first idea is not the best one. And so they might have an idea, they might kind of refine that idea a little bit, and either they look at that and go, that's no good, and they don't try it, or they try it and it doesn't work, and then they're like, I'm not going to have ideas anymore, that's not very good. So number one is the having lots and lots and lots and lots of ideas and being able to switch off that black hat. If everyone remembers those coloured thinking hats that you did like in primary school or like early secondary school, go Google them, they're all there. But that black hat is the one that's like, no, that's terrible, like the really critical one. And my black hat is like very strong. So to kind of turn off that black hat and say, I'm just gonna blur, like vomit ideas as much as I can, and then I'll worry about refining them later. But the second thing I think, so if it's not having ideas, the second thing that I think is the biggest challenge that I see is a lack of curiosity, a lack of people willing to learn something for themselves.
It's a very cynical age. It's a cynical age now. You can't get people to admit that they're interested in things, let alone have those people actually be interested in things now. It's a real tragedy.
But it's not even like being interested. I don't even know if it's being interested or maybe not having the tools about what is the next step to do. Like I am constant, like when Susan was talking before about go and look up the annual report, I could just imagine that a young super keen person in from a tertiary music institution would Google the word XYZ orchestra, go to the website, not be able to find a drop down menu that said annual report and just go, I can't find it. Instead of, okay, well, let's type in XYZ annual report 2019 into Google. So the search strategy of like, I mean, Google's amazing, but it's not a brain. Like you have to input the right information to get what you want out of it. And to then if you open that annual report and you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what any of this stuff means, then like open another tab and open YouTube and type in how to read an annual report. But it's like what we call it one-step thinking, that we just see a lot of one-step thinking of I've got to this point and there's some kind of barrier or there's something I understand and I give up. Instead of, I mean, we are in an unprecedented time where you can learn anything about anything pretty much for free from anywhere in your pocket while you're sitting on the toilet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you need to like be willing to take that extra step. Like when you get to something you don't know, go, okay, well,
go deeper.
You find that. And that's usually what takes you on like the most interesting tangents of, you know, I've got a browser tab open, which is like about all the different knives you need to cut leather, or because like I wanted to make a project of making a leather like handbag. And now I'm like deep in the wormhole about like the different knives that you need and how to like sharpen them. And, you know, that's just because I kept following that train rather than going, oh, the random scalpel that I happen to have at home doesn't cut it very well. Oh, I guess I won't do that thing anymore then.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this leads me to a point that I really want to discuss, probably our final point, which is really important in being your own boss. How can I do this quickly? Okay, so the people I see who are successful at being their own boss are workaholics, and they experience huge anxiety, huge burnout regularly. It's a kind of undisciplined attitude in itself. Being a workaholic is also an undisciplined thing, like it is to be just lazy and not earn any money and just expect your patron to come and dump some money on you. It's like the opposite end of the extreme. So speaking of your OCD leather cutting tool obsession at the moment, this also relates to being a conductor. You have to know the different sounds, the different instruments, the different clefs. You really have to have that inquisitive mind to get into the depth of what it is that you want to do. And Susan, with you need to know people. You need to know how they think, who they are on all these deep levels before you can help them and advise them. So how do you girls particularly stop the burnout, especially when the work you do doesn't always earn you money straight away, which feels even more of burnout because it's like you're putting all this effort in and you're not always getting paid for your time. So advice, this has to be our last point, the advice to people who experience burnout because of like a less reward in their minds. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Okay, so three books to read. Number one, by a guy called Michael Bungay Stainer, and we'll send you
link it.
details, called
The Coaching Habit.
The Coaching Habit, but he talks about the advice monster and how most advice is useless. So I'm not going to give you any advice.
Okay.
I'm going to say read his book if you're interested in how to stay curious for longer and ask better questions.
There's 2 books of his actually.
Yeah.
We'll send them to you.
Okay, yeah, cool.
So
He's Aussie.
He's amazing. The second book is by Seth Godin, and it's called The Dip. And it's all about being in the trough of no success, grinding to get up to the other side, and how that discomfort and ability to tolerate nothing happening for long enough is what gets you. So The Dip. And the third one is written by, well, can I tell you who they are? They're twin sisters. They're American twin sisters. One's a sex educator and one's a choral educator. Conductor, right? And they wrote this book called Burnout.
Perfect.
The Secret, Solve Your Stress Cycle. And it talks about the difference between stressors, the things that cause the stress, and the stress response, which is what you feel inside your body. It's blowing our minds.
This is what we all need right now.
Yeah, it's listen to every
Put them
podcast.
on your list.
Oh, they're so
of people
amazing.
to interview.
Oh my God. Are they, what nationality are these twins?
They're American.
Okay, well, of course they're American. Americans, it's almost like Americans have created all the problems, but they're all really solving all the problems as well.
So Sarah, just super quick, coming back to the issue of workaholism.
Yeah,
my name's Susan and I'm a workaholic. It's been 2 hours since my last work. Ingrid Martin's been doing a very good job of helping me be a recovering workaholic.
Okay.
Like a method that I am able now to implement that's taken me, it'll be 7 years next year that I've been really focusing on doing this work, is building to a model where I'm either free or expensive. And the organizations who really have capacity to pay properly. And I say to them, I'm a social enterprise, and the work that needs doing, like working with early career people who don't have capacity to pay, it's a decentralized, if you get out of music school, there's no net, there's no way to catch you, there's no organization that looks after you because the music schools themselves don't have a lifelong learning journey for you, right? There's no alumni. So that work that I do is at no cost to those people who really need it. And I'm really clear with the people who can pay about why I'm expensive, because that offsets this work to be done at no cost. So it's taken 7 years of doing the work for no money to build enough interest in my work that I can charge enough. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit of something. It's not an instant thing. And if you're after a quick turnaround on a time for services model, go work in IT. Like it's just not a sector where you can turn something up straight away, because the work comes from the glue between people and the relationship you have, and that just takes years. Like this year I landed the biggest contract I've ever landed. That's been a 7-year build, and it's been nearly 3 years in working towards that contract. And it's a really significant piece of work, but I couldn't push it. You can't make anything happen. You have to just foster the relationships and continue to serve people and be patient. And if you don't want to do that, and if your needs are too immediate for that, you're going to need to do something else to pay the bills to allow you to be patient and get this work going.
And I think Susan read me this great quote yesterday. I don't actually know where it was from, which was, if you're working in an industry or a context where there's going to be lots of striving and guaranteed a lot of rejection, which is the inherent model of being your own boss, that you need to have a different relationship with winning. Because it needs to be about the progress, not the perfection. Because if you put all of your worth in, this goal, which it might be 5 years away or 3 years away or whatever it is, that you're going to burn out.
Yep.
But if you put your personal value that's got nothing to do with anybody else thinks about what you are doing in your work, that if you are in charge of saying, like, I did a good day's work today and now I'm going to switch off, that's what's going to make you feel better, be more well.
You're in it for the long haul.
For the long haul, and it's more sustainable.
Yep.
In terms of this burnout idea, just from a very, very pragmatic level, I think it's about knowing how your working model works. So for me, like, I do a lot of work at night with like rehearsals and performances. And again, I've been doing this for like nearly 20 years of sometimes having a day job full-time during the day and doing this other stuff at night, or having a part-time job during the day and doing this other stuff at night. And I'm only just now really starting to work out, hey, it's not useful for me to work 6 hours during the day and then do a 3-hour rehearsal at night, because I'm not at my best for that 3-hour rehearsal at night. So I need to like let myself off the hook, or in a different way of saying it, like, I need to be kind to myself and realize that actually I don't need to start working until like 12 o'clock or 2 o'clock that day. Or I'm going to work for a couple of hours in the morning, then I'm deliberately going to have a long break in the middle of the day so that I'm mentally fresh when I get to that rehearsal that starts at 7:30 at night. So it's about working out what works for you and being extremely reasonable about what is real. So they talk in this book about the fact that of our time, whatever our time is, whether it's a day, a week, a month, a year, 40%, is that right?
42%.
42% of our time has to be downtime.
Oh, that seems a lot, doesn't it?
Yes, that's exactly what the book says. And the book says, we told you were going to be surprised when we told you. So it's basically 10 hours of every 24 hours should be rest and recovery.
Yeah.
So that doesn't necessarily mean sleeping, but it also means being off your screen, off your email, off your work. And you know what? Like, even if you are working for a big organization, I know this is a big workforce problem in general across the world, across every industry right now, about this always on culture, is you are in control of your time. And you can put an auto respond on your email that says, I only respond to emails between like 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. And then you can just decide, I'm not going to look at my email for the rest of the day. Tim Ferriss, 4-hour work week, if you want to get really good at like being very clear about what your boundaries are around your time for other people. But yeah, I think in doing that, if you haven't had practice doing that before, and this has been my experience, is that it's also a bumpy road. You're not going to get it perfect all at once.
Of course.
But not to like bash yourself up for saying, I worked till 10 o'clock. To just realize, okay, I worked till 10 o'clock. I don't feel very good right now. That's good to notice. I'm going to try and do better tomorrow.
Yeah.
And can I have a proper sleep? And can I have a sleep in tomorrow?
Yeah. So overall, I think the message here that keeps coming to me as we wrap this up is part 1 was about self-esteem. Once you've overcome that, it's about burnout. Because once you get the confidence to start doing everything, you'll burn out. So we have
Yep.
to find the slow burn stamina to achieve all the things that we now have confidence to achieve.
Yep.
And we have to distill it beautifully with your holy trinity of your three-way thing, the money, time, tribe, and the other who, what, and who wins.
Yep.
I think it's a really important thing to try and just be still enough in some parts of your day to be bored, to be creative, to be still enough to let ideas come to you, and then to be disciplined enough to do the work and then shut that work off when we're tired, so we can be at our absolute best absolutely all the time. So you girls really are the example of this. You've done so much work internally and together and in the community. I want to really thank you for everything you've done and all your wisdom that you share with us, because it's inspiring to me. It really is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to you for opening up the conversation. We were just saying last night, so much discussion that goes on around the topic of the classical music sector is really surface level. And we were trying to be very observant and not judgmental. And we just said what we're really craving is like meaningful conversation between people, and how much we would be inspired by that. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to have connect and have a meaningful conversation today.
Oh, no worries. This is a really important conversation. And let's think about a part 3, because part 1 is extremely important. Part 2, this is we've discovered it, the secret to life. Slow burn. All right. So thanks so much, girls. Take care, and we'll see you for a part 3.
Thanks, gorgeous.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye.